I want to say that I believe in the rule of law. Our ability to address grievances in a civil manner in the court of law is fundamental to our freedom as Americans. Our jury system is not perfect, but it works, and certainly a hell of a lot better than most other countries in the world. The lawyer I'm going to be talking to is an excellent trial lawyer who cares about helping people and making sure that they get a fair shake. The opinions and statements expressed by our guest, Andrew Baldwin, are his alone and do not represent the views of Alex Limontes, Hurst Limontes, Circle City Conversations, its producers, or sponsors. This miniseries is intended to share their story. Welcome back to Circle City Conversations. Today, we're wrapping up our special miniseries on the Delphi case with the third and final episode. In this conclusion, we take a deep dive into the long, complicated legal battles, the handling of evidence in court, and the challenges the defense has faced along the way. From questions about ritualistic elements at the crime scene to the uphill fight in the appeals process, this episode looks at the pursuit of justice, the resilience of Richard Allen, and the dedication of the legal teams working on his behalf. Again, don't forget to watch the Hulu special, Capturing Their Killer, The Girls on the High Bridge, which features our guest attorney, Andy Baldwin. Andy, I want to ask you a little bit about some of the evidence that came out, at least in the news and the media coverage. For example, the confession.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I know that some people just couldn't get past that.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about what happened there.
So April the 3rd of 2023 is a day I'm not ever going to forget. That was Brad Rosie called me in the morning and said something is really wrong with Rick. And so we drove up there. I had just seen Rick 10 days earlier, and he had started to decline to some degree, certainly physically and even mentally. He was not the affable guy. I mean, as affable as you can be. From the first time that I met him to April the 3rd, there was a kind of what I would say, physical and emotional and mental decline. But it really dropped or I guess, I don't know what the right verb is, but it on April the 3rd, when we went and saw Rick, he was not the same guy that I had seen 10 days before. Something had happened. And later on, what we had learned is that he had made 3 phone calls in the morning, one to his stepdad, and 2 to Kathy, I think is his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge would not let us play the one to the stepdad, which is also just, we needed it for context. Technically, people don't know this. If the defense wants to play something from the defendant, it's hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
But if the state wants to play it, they can play it. It's one of the more bizarre rules. I think that needs to be really looked into. And there's a whole great story about how we ended up getting Richard Allen's statements in that we thought were very great for us, but that's got to do with strategy and so forth. But anyway, as it relates to this issue of the so-called confessions, Richard, what we learned later, when we went and saw Richard, he was just out of sorts. And I mean, that's to say he's out of sorts. He was just not making any sense. He kept saying, "Is my wife okay?" He kept repeating the same thing over and over and over. He didn't trust us. I don't trust you, things like that. And it was heart-wrenching, man. I mean, it was so awful to watch this guy that you'd come to know during the preceding months just not look and act like the guy that you had seen over that time, even 10 days earlier. Brad Rosie, my co-counsel, started getting angry, almost at Rick. Like, what is wrong with you, And we didn't know. And then later on, we found out that morning, Rick had called his stepdad, and he made some statements that I thought that really helped explain what was going on. Rick had said something along the lines, and I could be wrong because it's been a minute, but it's time for Kathy to move on. Like, Rick, let me tell you about Rick.
Yeah.
Rick does not like to be in the spotlight. Rick does not want, and what he loves his wife. Rick Allen loves Kathy Allen like no man's business. And that's real. That's not some guy, a defense lawyer, just like, talking up his client to make him look like a human being. I'm telling you, he loves his wife more than as much, whatever capacity a man has for love for his wife, it's full with Richard Allen. And Kathy the same. Kathy adores Rick, and they were high school sweethearts, Rick and Kathy, and they had been married for over 30 years when he was arrested, and they had have a daughter, Brittany, and just a great group, great family. And Rick's kind of, Kathy's kind of his, the person, I don't want to say he's an introvert because he does go out on occasion, but he's, as Kathy would tell you, we're homebodies.
Yeah.
All right. When I'm not at work, I got to tell you, I'm a homebody too. I get that.
Yeah.
There's a certain age where there's an appeal to that. And that's what they were. And Rick was always really worried about Kathy, like, how's she doing? I can't have her go through this,
Mm-hmm.
Rick is very selfless.
Yeah.
Not selfish, selfless. And he was really worried about how his mom's elderly, how she was handling everything. It was always about them. What can I do to help them out? So one of my first thoughts was, is he making some confession just to end this? So that, to be done with it so Kathy can move on with her life. Because, he was super worried about that. Well, then when you hear the stepdad, the very first call of these kind of frantic phone calls, there's a context that exists where that is what was going on. And you listen to it and you're like, okay, that makes sense. He's like making statements that he knows is going to be harmful. So because he wants this case to be over with so Kathy can move on, because it's so heart-wrenching. And then over the span of the next 2 or 3 months, Rick was found to be in a state of psychosis, and was rambling and making nonsensical phrases. It wasn't just April the 3rd. It went on for the next few weeks. And all of the so-called confessions were generic. I did it. I killed those girls. I did kill them. He never gave any specifics,
right?
And except for one famous thing, and I don't want to get into that right now. I'm happy to get into it later, but related to a white van or a van. But Rick was making his confession. You know what he confessed to? He confessed to murdering his grandchildren. Okay.
So there was evidence of other things that he was saying that were.
He confessed to killing the girls by shooting them in the back. And he confessed to burying their bodies, things that were provably not true. He didn't even have grandchildren, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He confessed to molesting his sister. His sister is a very nice person. We talked to her. She's like, no, that's just crazy. I mean, I can't even believe he'd say something like that. There's no hidden family secrets with Richard Allen. Came from a very kind of, by all accounts, normal family situation. He was in the Army for a period of time. He's just a regular guy. And so these confessions, I call them the so-called confessions. They weren't confessions. They were, and we had an expert witness that got up and explained, when you are in solitary confinement for over 30 days, it messes you up mentally. The United Nations does not allow for inmates to be, I think it's might be only 15 days, but it's certainly no more than 30 days that you can be in solitary confinement. Richard Allen was in solitary confinement. By the time that he made these so-called confessions, it had been from November of 2022 to April of 2023. So that's November, December, January, February, March, 5 months. He's not able to see family members. This is a guy that every night was home to have dinner with his wife, talk to his wife, and all of a sudden that's cut out.
Wow.
And he's in the midst of, when we're there on April the 3rd, Alex, I'm already into the Odin angle. Like it's right when I am discovering the Odin stuff, it's maybe 2 to 3 weeks, maybe about that time frame earlier. I'm talking about mid-March time frame. I started finding all the Odin stuff I was picking through and finding this stuff. And I'm trying to tell Brad, Rosie, and Brad and I we are different in a lot of ways. And one way is I'm willing to think about the conspiracy side, and Brad is too. He's open-minded, but he's not willing. You got to really prove it to him, okay? And so the Odin stuff was going on for roughly, I'd say 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks. I'm trying to convince Brad of it, and that this is a real thing. This is not. There really is the possibility that Odinism was involved here. And Brad's kind of, he's not giving me the Heisman completely, but he's like, you got to be able to prove that better. And that's one of the reasons that he and I worked well together, is because he would push back, and I need that. And I would push back to him too. And we respect each other, love each other now. And you're not even going to believe this if you haven't heard this. So April the 3rd, we're in there with Richard Allen, talking to Richard. And he's not making any sense. And like I said earlier, he's talking about, oh, my wife, is she okay? Is she okay? That kind of thing. And Brad's getting irritated, and I'm like, what is going on here? That was also the first day, by the way, that they had brought Richard Allen with these 2 new guards that I had never seen before. Now, maybe they had brought them over before, but he's shackled like Hannibal Lecter, and he's walking in, and these guys, and they're videotaping. They're videotaping this, and that's never happened before. So I'm looking at 2 guards that I've never seen before. I'm not saying that they hadn't brought them over. I just had never noticed them until that day. And I never had seen them videotaping, but they're videotaping him all the way up until we go into this little room. And then when we finally decide to leave, and there's a lot of things that I could talk about that are, I think, of interest. We wanted to call Kathy and put her on a speakerphone to let Richard know that she was alive. Richard did not believe us. He thought she was dead or that something had happened to her. So I went out and talked to the captain, and I said, I've got my phone here. Can I call Kathy right now, and it'll calm him down? I think it's a smart thing to do. Let me go back and talk to the warden. Well, he comes back. Nope, can't do it. Okay. Well, finally we give up. We can't get any heads or tails. We don't know what's going on with Richard. So we're like, we're ready to leave. So here come these guards videotaping. As they're walking down, they're videotaping. They're not even with Richard yet, and they're videotaping on their way down to talk to us. They get close, and I look at them, and they're wearing patches on their DOC uniform.
Yeah.
Their name is on the right side.
Yeah.
The right side. And on the left, there was a patch that said, and you're not even going to believe me, "In Odin we trust."
In Odin we trust.
In Odin we trust. And there was the symbol, one of the symbols of Odinism is this interlocking triangles, 3 triangles. And there was that as well. In Odin we trust was these interlocking triangles. And I just looked at that, and as we're heading down...
Was Brad with you?
Brad was with me. And as we're headed down the hallway, I say, "Hey, Brad, look at their patch. Look at the patch on the left side." Holy crap. And we get down to the end of the hallway, and the captain is there. And up until this day, we had been treated like royalty when we had been to Westville, okay?
Yeah.
They rolled out the red carpet for us. We had, because it's this decrepit old freaking dungeon that they put Rick in, and others as well. is way at the back of the property. We had to take like the equivalent of a golf cart, like a gator or whatever they're called. And they always treated us nice. They always gave us kind of the first class accommodations. We were always allowed to bring our phones in. And so when we went, after we saw these guys with Odin patches on their bodies, Brad said, "What's going on with those?" Brad's a very blunt guy. Like Brad,
He'll say it.
Brad will just say whatever. And and I'm more like strategic. Like I want to like, is it wise to do that or not? And it suits both of us very well. Like it's who he is. He's a genuine, authentic guy. And Brad says, "What's going on with these Odin patches? What's going on there? Are they allowed?" And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's the captain. He's the head of that. I think he was the head of it. And he all of a sudden, in my opinion, takes an attitude. Well, then I walk over to one of those guys. They dropped Richard off. We walked right behind them. That's when I'm whispering to Brad. Brad sees them as they peel off. He sees the Odin patch. They go take Richard to his cell, and then we're talking to the captain. And then I see one of those guys walking down the hallway. One of the two guys wearing the Odin patches was walking down the hallway, and I chased after him. And I said, "Hey, I got a question for you, man. What does that patch mean? In Odin we trust." And he looked at me and he said, "That is I'm going to forget the exact wording, but that is a pagan. It's a pagan religion. He's a pagan god." And I said, "Oh, okay. What's going on with that?" And he wouldn't say anything. Then he just left. I don't remember the exact phrase, but he said it's a pagan god. And I was like, okay. So then we get in the car, and my mind's blown. I'm like, 3 or 4 weeks before, again, I had just started noticing that they were, not noticing, I realized they were investigating Odinism as a possible explanation for the sticks on the girls and the F in the tree.
Yeah.
On the bark of the tree. And now I see these "In Odin we trust" patches. Is this real? Am I in a movie? I mean, is this really happening? And we thought that they would lie about that, because the next time we saw them, the Odin patches were no longer there.
They were gone.
And
you didn't get a picture or anything. You didn't have your phone on you.
Oh, we did then. And the answer is yes. And we did have, I do have a photo of it. Yes, I took a photo. And I think that's a reveal that nobody knows about. I do have a photo of that.
That's absolutely fucking crazy.
And that was the last time we were able to bring our phones in. Well, then the warden named Gallipo on June 15th, 2023. No, at a later hearing. It was after June it was June 15th, 2023. Dates. If you haven't noticed,
I'm surprised you can remember the ones you. That's pretty good.
But Gallipo got up on the stand and he said that we were never allowed to bring our phones in. And I was thinking, that's just not true. We were always, every single time, they had a process for us to be able to bring our phones in. And then we weren't able to bring our phones in. And nobody's ever explained that to me. And he just basically got up and did not tell the truth. Now, I don't know whether he did that intentionally or he didn't know what was going on. I don't know. But that's always bothered me, that he's just able to get up there and make a story up like we weren't able to bring our phones in. It's very obvious to me what happened. They didn't like that we had our phones in there because we were exposing what was going on within the DOC. He was later taken to to the juvenile facility somewhere else, and now he's gone. And I think he was, he's just no longer working for the Department of Corrections any longer, as are the psychologist that was working with Richard Allen. Her name's Monica Walla, who is a psychologist who was a Delphi fanatic, who before Richard Allen, she was watching Richard Allen and talking to Richard Allen. Dr. Walla had been to the bridge, had walked, to the bridge on the trail where the girls walked, listened to podcasts about the Delphi murders, and now she was, the one talking to Richard Allen. And the only so-called confession that had any detail to it at all was handwritten. There was no tape recording. He was always being tape recorded, always. But this was not tape recorded. And in her notes, Dr. Walla claimed that he said that he saw a van, and that's what freaked him out. And we didn't learn that until way later. And Dr. Walla, there was, by the way, any Delphi fanatic out there that followed this case, and I say that for the most part endearingly. There's a lot of fanatics out there that will maybe watch this or listen to this, and they may think I'm being mean. I'm not. There's a lot of them that I really appreciate the work and effort and energy they've put into this case. There's some that are not so much endearing to me, but anybody that would have been paying attention to this case, let me tell you, there were, I don't know how many mentions of vans or white vans out there on social media between 2017 and 2022 when Richard Allen was arrested. And if Monica Walla was watching and paying attention as she was, she would know and be able to say, Richard, now, did you see a van? Yeah. Richard, is that what scared you? Yeah, that's what scared me. I saw a van, and in his delicate psychological state, that could have happened, or she could have just made it up. That'd be another possibility. By the way, does she any longer, Dr. Walla, work for the Department of Corrections? Does she do any work for them? No, she does not.
Oh, my.
There was a point in time where we thought that was the craziest, biggest thing going on. Like we were going to be able to show a jury that, and that would really set Richard free, because any jury that would see that and that these guys had just kind of shown up out of nowhere, they're now videotaping. They videotaped our attorney-client meetings through a glass wall, and they made Richard sit. This is another crazy thing. They made Richard sit. The two guys wearing the Odin patches made Richard sit like you are, Alex, and then they filmed over here through a glass, and they were reading his lips. Yeah, I mean, and we're trying to have meaningful conversation with our client, and that's what we're going through. I mean, it's bizarre. That is not normal. Okay, no, that is not normal at all. But we thought that all that patch, the Odin patches, was going to be a big deal, and in the scheme of the case, it ended up being maybe out of the top 500 things, that might have been number 360. Okay, I mean. And that's still a big, but it's still a big deal. I mean, I hardly ever talk about it because it doesn't seem to be of interest to anybody anymore. Yet I just remembered it, and I thought, maybe you should know that. Yeah. Odin patches on the guards.
That's crazy.
When Odinists were being investigated as the killers.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Through the course of the case, you had essentially raised this, I don't want to misstate it. I would call it a third-party defense, but essentially, right?
Right.
Third party
defense.
Third-party defense that someone else committed this heinous crime. Okay.
Not just one person, but there's no question in my mind it was multiple people.
Multiple people.
Okay.
Other people did it. Was that evidence ever allowed in?
No. The answer is no. Judge Gull, much like the Garmin on the Allison Davis case that we talked about earlier, the murder case we won in May, she did not allow that Garmin evidence, which was exonerating evidence. She did not allow it in that case. In my opinion, this third-party suspect, I view it as exonerating, but at a very, very minimum, the jury needed and deserved, and under the Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution, had a right to hear about these third-party suspects. But Judge Gull would not allow it in, and it was insane. Her reasoning, well, I told you about this before we started. There was a kind of a big day, April the 28th of 2024 was a big day. That was a Sunday. And I and Brad Rosie had asked Judge Gull a few questions about process. How many people in the box for jury selection? How many alternates? I think Brad was asking, where is Richard going to be housed? Housekeeping things that trial lawyers know to ask. And in that email, Judge Gull answered all the questions that we had. But at the very bottom, this is what I'm about to say, altered the landscape of Carroll County, this case, forever, perhaps. Okay. And the last paragraph of that email said, by the way, guys, this is Judge Gull, and I'm going to paraphrase. I don't know exactly what you're doing as far as a defense. And what I want to say, by the way, did you, Judge Gull, read our September 18th Frank's memo? We kind of laid it out on a silver platter for you. But I don't know what you're doing as far as the defense is concerned. But if you're going to point the finger at third-party suspects, I don't see a nexus, and I'm not going to allow that evidence in. Now, I'm paraphrasing. Okay, now here's what's important to know about that. And this is in the real world, in the normal world that I keep talking about, right? Judges let attorneys battle it out. If Nick McClelland, the prosecutor, thought that there was a problem, legally speaking, with the admissibility of third-party suspect evidence, then Nick McClelland, the prosecutor, would have filed what's called a motion in limine saying they should not be allowed, the defense should not be allowed to talk about third-party suspect evidence. Nick McClelland had known since September the 18th, 2023, that we were looking at these third-party suspects, that this is who we were pointing the finger at. So in September, he could have filed a motion in limine. In October, he could have. November, December, January, February, March, and April, all of April, he could have filed a motion in limine. What did Nick McClelland, do instead of filing a motion in limine? Well, he took taxpayer money and he hired an Odinist expert who purportedly would have come in and tried to debunk the Odin angle. Okay. Mm-hmm. So now we know that Nick McClelland, because of that, and because he did not file any motions in limine, we knew that Nick McClelland believed that all of this stuff was coming into evidence, right? Why would he spend taxpayer money on an expert instead of filing a motion in limine and saying, before I'm going to expend money on an expert, I'm going to see if the judge is even going to allow it in? I'll tell you why. Because he knows, and he knew, and he knows now, even to this day, I believe, that stuff is admissible. He knows that the third-party suspect evidence was admissible, and it was this April the 28th, Sunday morning email that sent a telegraph, basically, to Nick McClelland from Judge Gall, and the telegraph was this: stop. There is a chance that I'm going to, or maybe even a likelihood that I, as the judge, am going to exclude third-party suspect evidence if you file a motion in limine. Stop. That's the telegraph. And Nick McClelland, I called Brad Rosie right afterwards, and I said, if Nick McClelland is anything but an idiot, he's going to file a motion in limine like in the next 12 hours. And I said 12 hours, and almost to the time frame, 12 hours later, he filed it like midnight, a motion in limine to keep out the third-party suspect evidence, all of it. And that is going to be probably the lead issue. I'm not doing the appeal, but that will probably, the third-party suspect stuff will definitely be an appellate issue that the Court of Appeals will be dealing with. And let me tell you something. The reason that the Judge Gall claimed, she never got into any detail. Judge Gall, when she granted their motion in limine, she just said she didn't. Here's what normally happens in a normal world, in a real world, on such a big case, even on a small case, with such big issues. You see it probably in summary judgment motions and orders when they're denying or granting summary judgment motions or denying them. You see case law. The defense is requesting that third-party suspect evidence comes in. They presented the following pieces of evidence. State versus Smith says this. I find that the defense did not present that. Therefore, I'm not letting it in. But it would be, in a case like this, we're talking about a 10, 15, 20-page order, at least a couple of pages, right? Yeah. This was like a paragraph. And then most of it was, the following things will not be admitted into evidence. I'm granting the state's motion. And then it just identified what they were. There was no legal reasoning other than this. There's not a nexus. Now, the case law, she didn't really cite any case law that I remember at all. I don't think there was a single case cited, but there is talk about a nexus. A nexus means it's a very low bar. You can't. Here's what the case law basically says. You can't go in if there's somebody found dead in your house. You can't go into trial and say the next door neighbor did it, unless you have some evidence that suggests that he did it. So maybe he had been there earlier in the day, and it shows him on a security camera walking towards your house. It's something minimal. Maybe there's a motive out there. The next door neighbor and the dead guy in your house had gotten into an argument earlier in the day about, something. Mm-hmm. it's a minimal bar. Nexus, it's a minimal bar, okay? I'm going to tell you this, Alex. When you look at the third-party suspect evidence that we put into evidence in the Franks memo, the exhibits, and on August 1st, we had a hearing on this motion in limine, all the evidence we put in there, this is what's required. I'm putting my fingers about an inch apart to reach a nexus. Go up about 5 miles above my fingers. That's how much evidence that we had that supported multiple different defendants potentially being involved in the murders of these girls, okay? The nexus was easily met, and anybody that looks at that evidence, in my opinion, now I don't want to forecast the Court of Appeals. I'm not trying to say, this is my opinion. I'm an attorney. I'm a human being. I have my right to my opinion, and my opinion is the nexus level is laughable that it was not met. It's laughable. Mm-hmm. And because of Judge that April 28th email that Judge Gull sent us, if it does happen that the Court of Appeals does reverse because of that third-party suspect evidence was not being allowed to be admitted, then that April 28th email is going to cost Carroll County millions and millions of dollars, because Nick McClelland would never have filed a motion in limine but for her sending that email out. And that's not, by the way, proper for, in my opinion, that's not proper for a judge to send an email like that out. Sua sponte, as we say, on her own. She should not have done that. That's, I'll tell you another way to view it would be, she didn't send me any emails in a paragraph at the bottom saying, by the way, if they're going to try to get the Garmin, the Fitbit in, I'm not going to let that in either.
Right.
I didn't get that email.
No.
I didn't get that response at the end of an email on Sunday morning, April 28th. So anyway, so the third-party suspect evidence was never allowed in. The jury never got to see that. The jury never got to hear from Kevin Murphy, state trooper, very honorable guy who knows a ton of stuff about this third-party suspect, and he and Todd Click and Greg Ferenczi, who is now deceased, and that's a whole other thing, but all of them, well, let's talk about Todd Click for a second, shall we? I mean, Todd Click was one of the law enforcement officers involved in investigating the Odin angle, okay? Mm-hmm. And when Todd Click, who's from Rushville, when he heard that Richard Allen had been arrested, he was so concerned, Todd Click was, that that law enforcement had overlooked the Odin angle, that he, Todd Click, hired his own lawyer. Listen to this. This is not something I've never seen before. Todd Click, a law enforcement officer, hired his own lawyer because Todd Click, did not know exactly how to navigate these waters. He went to his lawyer, who's a former elected prosecutor, by the way, his lawyer, Paul Barretta, good guy, good lawyer. And Paul said, man, I've never had this happen before. So what Paul did is he drafted a letter that said, essentially, Nick McClelland, prosecutor, hey, I'm not really sure that you know about there's this whole other investigation going on, and there's some pretty compelling evidence out there about who committed these crimes. And I also not only don't know whether you know about the investigation itself, but I also have a lot of evidence in the form of interviews and other evidence that you might be interested in, and the defense has a right to that stuff if you haven't provided that to them. So I'm sending you this flash drive with all this evidence on it, and I'm sending you this email or this letter to let you know about this whole Odin investigation and the investigation of these people particularly, mm-hmm. and what we've done. And I would love to come in and talk to you. Now, at that time, Todd Click was, he didn't think that there was anything weird going on necessarily. He was just thinking maybe they didn't know about this because the investigation was down in Rushville, a lot of it, and maybe he just didn't know about it. Well, that was sent by certified mail, okay?
Okay.
That was sent by certified mail and received by Nick McClelland, received that certified mailing, I believe it was May the 1st of 2023, okay? Here's the real world again. This is the the actual world of what should have happened versus what did happen. When you get, as a prosecutor, when you get that letter and it's certified and it says the stuff that it said in that letter, that there's a whole other world out there of suspects, Odin suspects, that 3 cops were investigating heavily, and we think that you may have gotten the wrong guy. Now, the letter didn't exactly say that, but that was the tone of it for sure. When you get that letter and you're a prosecutor, this is what we call in first year of law school, exculpatory evidence, okay? That's exculpatory evidence. And when you get that as a prosecutor, here's what happens in the normal world. Hi, Andy, it's, Jim Smith. Just wanted you to know I got this evidence in. It seems to be what you might call exculpatory. I'm not really sure. We're going to be investigating it to see what is really going on here, but I wanted you to be aware of it, and we're going to send that to you right now. That happens on if you get the document May 1st at 8 a.m. and you read it at noon, you're making that phone call at 12:30 p.m. on May 1st. Well, May happens. We don't hear anything. June happens. July. August, we're going in to depositions. We still don't hear about it. Then we start talking about Odin stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff that Todd Click had let the prosecutor, Nick McClellan, know about. So now Nick, by then he has had to have read this letter from Todd Click and looked at it and talks, and know that we're talking about Odin, that Todd Click was talking about Odinism, and now the defense is talking about Odinism. So then even if you give him, as Nick McClellan, as many benefits of the doubt as you can, it could be something like this. Oh my God, I forgot. Now that you're talking about that, I forgot that Todd Click, this guy, sent me a letter through his lawyer about this Odin stuff, and I've got a whole bunch of evidence for you, and I'm sorry, I should have gotten that to you. That's what normally would happen. Normally what would happen is you'd get that phone call at 12:30 p.m. on May 1. But now we're in August, we're talking about Odinism stuff, and McClellan doesn't say crap about it. He doesn't mention it. He doesn't say anything. Finally, September the 8th, I believe it was, we get a new evidence dump. So now we're over 4 months away from him getting this exculpatory evidence, and he just dumps it in the middle of a bunch of other stuff, and we found it. And that is not normal, folks. That's not how this is supposed to work. And Nick McClellan has never answered to that. He's no journalist, not one single journalist has gone to him and said, why did it take you 4 months to send that to them? And why did you not send it to them earlier? And why did you not call them and tell them, hey, on August the 11th, after the depositions, hey, you needed to know this. Think about the Purdue professor then. Start linking this stuff up together, right? Well, he didn't want us to know about the Purdue professor either. When the Franks memo came out, here's my explanation. When the Franks memo came out, Todd Click was talked about.
In the memo.
He was talked about in the Franks memo, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's when he sent it. He knew, well, no, I guess we got it earlier. On August 10th, when we started talking about the Odinism stuff. Think about it that way.
Yeah.
Think about it that way. McClellan gets it on May 1st, he gets the letter from Todd Click talking about Odinism stuff. We deposed these guys in August about Odinism stuff. I had driven all the way down to Georgia to get evidence. I'm a dogged pursuer. I'm going to find out everything. And they knew that. And so my opinion of what happened is that when they knew that we knew about the Odinism stuff, after we stopped playing dumb about it, now they know we're going to get to Todd Click.
Oh, yeah.
And so now they still waited a month, roughly, to send us the Todd Click stuff.
And they buried it.
But they had to send it to us because we were going to find out about it. Which is worse? Us finding out about it through Todd Click when we talked to him and then going and saying, hey, did you get a letter? Or are you sending it to us? And then being able to say, well, no, I did send it to him.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And he's never been held accountable for that. I don't know what's going on there.
My family immigrated here from Cuba after Fidel Castro took over, and this government took everything from my family, and that attracted me to be a lawyer. Insurance companies can be like bullies, and they have a lot of resources behind them. Give us a call here at Hurst Limontes. We are protective of our clients because our clients matter and you matter. At Hurst Limontes, we're a firm that believes in people. We don't just talk about justice or fairness, we live it. The Indiana Fever are trailblazers. They inspire not only in how they play, but how they lead in our Indiana community. Being a father changes everything. Supporting the Fever is one way that I show my kids what it means to believe in fairness, to believe in respect and possibility. At Hurst Limontes, we believe in those same things. The Fever stand for resilience, grit, determination, and heart. They aren't just a basketball team. They're a symbol of what's possible when you refuse to give up. Their impact ripples far beyond the court, and you can see it in the energy, pride, and hope that they create in our city. Whether you're a young girl dreaming of playing in the WNBA or a kid in a small town dreaming of becoming a lawyer, you belong. This partnership is proof of that. At Hurst Limontes, we believe in standing up for those people that are overlooked. From court to court, Hurst Limontes is your winning team.
I made some serious accusations in that Frank's memo, okay? Serious allegations about the Purdue professor. Serious allegations later on in other subsequent Frank's memos, there were 4 of them, about the Todd Click stuff that I just talked to you about. In a normal world, a judge gets everybody into the courtroom and says, somebody's got some explaining to do. Mr. Baldwin, these are serious allegations. Mr. McClellan, if this stuff is true, you better have an explanation. Go. Let's talk. Nothing. We didn't hear anything. The judge never asked Nick McClellan to explain himself. We always had to explain ourselves on the things that they didn't like. Nick McClellan, in my recollection, never had to explain anything. And these are heavy allegations.
How did the pictures of the symbols come into evidence?
So that's
did the jury ask about that? Were they like, hey, what's this right here?
So that's a great question, Alex. And here's the answer. The video, the photographs of the F tree and of the sticks on the bodies did come into evidence. Okay. Mm-hmm. The explanation given by state police and other investigators was Richard Allen was trying to cover the bodies, to hide the bodies, to conceal the bodies. Okay. It's preposterous. Anybody that looks at that is like, one of them is one of the stick formations on one of the girls was looked like what they call a bind rune, which is the combination of 2 different runes, or possibly one specific rune. It looks, the easiest way to say it is it looks like an asterisk. So there were 1, 2, 3 sticks arranged on the body.
Yeah.
Okay. Libby's was definitely bind rune, in my opinion. Not that I'm an expert, but you become kind of an expert as a trial lawyer, you become somewhat of an expert. We had an expert, by the way, that worked for the FBI named Dawn Perlmutter. She teaches the FBI what to look for in a ritualistic crime scene. Okay, this is Dawn Perlmutter's. This is what she does. She teaches the FBI that. She teaches local and federal and state law enforcement all over the country, and even in at least one case, I think it was the Virgin Islands, she was called in as an expert. And almost every time she's working for police, as they're trying to figure out, what does this mean? What does these signs mean? She's a ritualistic killing expert, if you want to say that, ritualistic crime scene expert. What did Dawn Perlmutter say at the August 1st hearing when we're trying to get this evidence in? This is what she said. This is a textbook ritualistic crime scene.
Wow.
Textbook. Yet we're not allowed to talk about there being a ritualistic crime scene, even if we're not allowed to talk about or point the finger at third-party suspects. We weren't even allowed to talk about this being a ritualistic crime scene at all, even though we put on an expert that said that, and they put on no experts to counter that. None. It's very similar to the Garmin and the Allison Davis case. We put on the experts that show that it's, it's reliable and can be used in courts of law all over the country. Mm-hmm. They didn't put on, this prosecution didn't put on any evidence of any expert, and they won and we lost. Same thing happened here. We put on a renowned expert, and that wasn't for, the judge didn't explain herself, didn't explain why. I guess the judge, some could argue that the judge thinks that she knows more about ritualistic crime scene evidence, because there's only two people making that assessment. One is Don Perlmutter, the expert, right, and the other one is the person that writes the ruling, the judge. And so to answer your question, the jury did get to see the photos, but they had to be wondering what the heck those stick arrangements were on the tree. Well, during the trial, I filed a motion saying they have opened the door to allowing us to talk about the ritualistic crime scene element of this case, because they, the prosecution, should not be allowed to put on witnesses that say this was a covering. They're trying to conceal the bodies. And so they get to say what their theory is about why the sticks were on the bodies, and we don't get to say why we think the sticks were on the bodies. They've opened the door. So I filed a motion in the middle of the trial, and the judge never ruled on it. And also they, at one point in time, on a redirect, I think it was Jerry Holman, on the state's redirect of Jerry Holman, I think it was him, it might have been somebody different, said, another theory is that the sticks represented what's called an undoing, which is another theory that was out there, that you try to cover up the area that's been there. This was a knife wound. You try to cover that up with sticks so that you don't have to look at it as the killer. And so the prosecution at trial gave two explanations about these sticks. It's a covering to conceal the bodies, which is preposterous. I mean, if you saw what everybody in that jury saw, there's no way that you would sit and arrange sticks like this. Or the second thing is it's an undoing, which Don Perlmutter, our expert, said that's not what an undoing is. Undoing is completely different. They're off on that.
Yeah.
Yet the state got to talk about both of those reasons for the sticks being on the bodies, and the defense was not able to talk about any of it. And when I filed the motion, it was ignored until I finally, near the end of the trial, I said, "Are you ever going to rule on that?" And she said, "There's no nexus." That was her answer.
That was it.
And I wish I would have pushed back then and said, well, okay, first of all, that's not really what the point of the motion was, that they've opened the door. It's not about a nexus.
Right. So you mentioned an appeal.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on next with the case?
Right now, I think the transcript is done or close to being done, and I've had a few opportunities to talk to Stacey Uliana. She's a friend of mine from back in the day. I mean, we're not like super close friends, but she's an unbelievably great lawyer, both trial lawyer and appellate lawyer. And I've told her this is going to be the challenge of a lifetime. I don't know how you're going to take all of this information, all of this evidence, and manage to put it in a brief that fits within the word count that's required or needed under the law. Mark Lehman is the second appellate lawyer. He's a brilliant guy also. He helped us get back on the case when we were kicked off, and I say kicked off. And he argued in front of the Indiana Supreme Court to get us back on. We had a lot of support from a lot of lawyers all over the state, and he was the guy. He and Carol Weinecke argued that in front of the Supreme Court, and we got back on the case because of him. And he's also one of the appellate lawyers. So Mark Lehman and Stacey Uliana, and it'll take. Once the transcript's done, they're probably going to need at least 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 extensions. And I hope the Court of Appeals gives them that much grace, because they're going to need it to get their arms wrapped around just the evidence from August 1st. The third-party suspect evidence is a massive endeavor. And then they have to listen to all that and then form persuasive arguments as to why third-party suspect evidence should have come in. I suspect another issue will be, should Judge Gall have taken herself off? We tried to get her off the case, I think, 3 times. We filed motions and very detailed motions. There's going to be other appellate issues. That's their job. That's their bailiwick. They're really great at that, they being Stacey and Mark. And then I'm going to guess if they have that brief written by the end of the year, I think that would be a good timetable. It could be even a little bit into January maybe. and then the state will have probably as much time as the attorney general writes the appeal for the prosecution. They'll have, if it takes 5 months for this the appellate lawyers to draft it, the state will get 5 months. So now you're into May, June. This is all guesswork, by the way. And then it'll take 4, 5, 6 months for the opinion to come out. So, and then once hoping that it gets reversed, believing that the system works and it will get reversed, now you're into late 2026 by the time the opinion comes out. Now you got to get ready for trial again. So you're not looking at a trial until 2027, likely, in my opinion. I hope I'm wrong on that. And then I don't even know if I'm going to be on the case, as I've told Richard and Kathy Allen, the wife, who I'm very fond of, both of them, obviously. I mean, but I've told them, let's not get too caught up in the fact that we like each other, you know. And I had lunch with Kathy recently, and I said that to her again. I mean, she said, we're not near there yet, so let's just hold off on even thinking that way yet, because I don't want to be having blinders in because I believe that I know how to try this case, but I could be wrong, and I don't want my ego to take place over that. So if other people can come in and win the case, that's all that matters is winning. Yeah. That's the only thing that matters. And if I'm the one that's, you know, part of that, and Brad and Jennifer and the team is back together, that's great. If it needs to be somebody else, that's great too, because I don't care about that. It's about getting Richard Allen, an innocent man, out of prison for something that is a heinous crime that he did not commit. And then we can delve into part two, which is let's try to find the real killers out there, because they're walking around. And so it's going to be a long haul. We're still quite a ways away. In the meantime, you know, I still have people sending me emails and things about, and I appreciate it. There's a lot of people out there that know that Richard Allen is innocent. They know that multiple people had to have committed this crime. And there's a lot of, I still get tips, and I try to honor all of those tips. I try to read them. Some of them seem to be a little bit out there, but I still try to honor that. And, you know, it's been a wild ride. And, you know, I used to get very emotional talking about it, and now I'm kind of emoted out for the most part. I'm just angry, like Kathy is, the wife. And Richard, you know, he reaches out and calls me from time to time, and he says he's doing great. And he's optimistic, and I don't know if he's telling me that just to make me feel better, because that's how he is. He's, like I said, selfless guy. He's going to try to make the lawyers feel better. Mm-hmm. That can cause me to get emotional, because right. I do believe that about Richard. I think when he calls, I don't think he's doing that well. But I know that he's trying to make me laugh. He's a funny guy, and he asked me how my wife was, Michelle, the last time he called, and that's the type of guy he is. He when I say, how are you doing? He doesn't want to talk about himself. I'm doing great. I'm doing fine. How are you doing? How's Kinsey, your intern that worked on the case? He knows their names, you know, and he mentions it. Yeah. He's an awesome guy. And I told him, when you get out, we're going to go have a beer together, and now you can add Taco Bell to the list, because he's a big Taco Bell guy, and a coffee guy. He loves coffee. During the trial, I was able to get him coffee and bring him food, and the guards in Carroll County were so gracious to let us bring this guy. When Richard Allen got fruit, I brought him apples and strawberries and grapes. You would have thought that, you know, you and I get to come home to that every day, and you think about, you know, how awful it must be that you have to eat this food at this prison, and you don't even get the basicness, you know, the basic things that we take for granted, like fresh fruit and vegetables. Right. You know, and he got that. And for those month that we were in trial, he was eating well and happy. And last thing I want to say about that, and I've said this before, during the trial, again, the guards were so generous. We would go down to lunch, and I'd pack him lunch or bring him lunch from a restaurant. And Richard was just as normal as I'd seen him since the first time I saw him. And I realized why. He was just one of the guys. Yeah. He was hanging out with us. We were all eating together, talking about, you know, complaining about our wives a little bit, as he's eating food and talking about football. And he was just one of the guys talking about music. And it was as normal as he had been, a situation as he had been in forever. And that made me so happy. And when we were down there for lunch one time, he said, "Hey, Andy, I don't know if this meant anything to you, but the first time you ever met me, you came in, this would have been in November of 2022, went and saw him, and he said, you came over to me. I don't know if you remember this, Andy. And you gave me a hug. And I hadn't had human contact of a loving kind other than guards grabbing my arm and showing me where to go.
Yeah.
I hadn't had any human contact for about a month at that time. And I knew then that I felt then that you were going to be okay. Like you were you're on my side.
Right.
And he told me that 2.5 years later, roughly, and I should also tell you about people in prison, they're not getting that touch. Just that simple human touch matters. So I want to get him out so he can touch, hug me, hug his wife, and get on with his life. So, and then, by the way, he also wants, everything he's endured, he said, maybe what I'm learning is I need to advocate for those who are in prison, and that's something that he's interested in possibly doing when he gets out.
Yep. So Andy, if someone listening wants to get in touch with you or your firm, how can they do that?
The best thing to do is probably email andrew@criminaldefenseteam.com.
Okay.
You can call. We're in Google us, the Criminal Defense Team, and you can call. And I think we used to have a separate. You could hit like number 2, and it'd take you to a Delphi line. I don't know if that stopped or not, but you can do that. And I appreciate all the well-wishers out there. I don't the spotlight. I've just had to get used to it, and I know that for Richard Allen, to have the best chance of getting out, then the truth needs to come out. And if that involves me getting out, Hulu's doing a special that's going to be out in the fall, as is Court TV, and I do these podcasts from time to time. I would rather my brilliant law partners and the other brilliant lawyers in the firm get out there and talk about all the great things. We just got a guy falsely accused of rape, charges dismissed on Friday. Kelly Pyle and Mike Cunningham did that. And I'd rather them be out here talking about their stuff. But I recognize it is what it is. The Delphi case is going to be talked about. This is and it's good for Richard Allen that we do talk about it, because the truth matters. And the more the truth gets out there, the more likely he is to ultimately be released. I believe that.
Fantastic. So as far as you and the criminal defense team, you guys are trying a lot of cases. I was going to ask you what's next, but it's probably a trial.
We have a trial this week. We're representing a lawyer that's accused of getting into a battery situation with a cop, and we've represented a few lawyers in our time as a law firm. That's this week, and then we've got we're always trying juries. We just are, and we don't do that to be pains in the rear end. Some cases just need to be tried,
Exactly.
And when your client is not getting the outcome that they deserve, then you need to try the case. Whether they're guilty or not, in some ways, doesn't even matter. I mean, if it's a first-time offender and it's a DUI and they're being offered a year in prison or a year in jail, you got to try that case. Not that happens. That doesn't happen, but I'm giving you an example of sometimes things like that do happen. It's like, well, if you're not going to do what's reasonable here, then we'll just go to trial.
Right.
And so we brainstorm, and I just walked into our Indianapolis office this morning, and I saw them, the work of their brainstorming was on the whiteboard. I'm a whiteboard freak. I love a whiteboard. I see one right over here.
One right here.
I love it. And I love a whiteboard. We've got them all over all of our offices, and it just warms my heart to see, a good fact, bad fact, and who's doing the motion in limine and voir dire and all of the things that we do. I just love it. And I love participating in those brainstorming sessions. And I love everything about what's going on. And I by the way, I advocate and root for all law firms that represent people that are accused of crimes. I mean, of course, I am proud of my law firm, but man, if you're out there doing this work, it doesn't have to be a first-year lawyer. If you're 10 years in or 20 years in, man, take this job seriously. Work on your craft. You know, if you don't know about the chapter method of Larry Posner and your cross-examinations suck, or if they need to be better, look up Larry Posner. You know, and go to one of he's been here a couple of times. It's life-changing stuff. If you don't know how to do an opening, if you don't understand the importance of opening statement and how, in my opinion, way, way, way more important than closing argument, then, you know, give me a call. If you need brainstorming help, give us a call. My firm will help you out, because these people's lives matter. And don't mail it in. Even if you're mad at the client,
right?
Even if you're so angry that they're not taking a plea or whatever, figure out a way to win.
Yeah.
Brainstorm it. Get help from outside, you know?
Yeah.
That stuff's important.
Absolutely.
So
I do love that about our Indianapolis and Indiana community. The lawyers work well together.
I think they do.
Yeah. We certainly do try to help each other. So, well, thank you, Andy. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Now I got to get to court and hope that I don't get yelled at. I'm a little late. Hey, thanks, Alex. It's really great, and I'm sorry I babbled on, but I appreciate you letting me talk.
No problem. I'm glad to have you.
All right, and we'll talk to you when Richard Allen is released, and we'll bring him in here with me.
We'll bring him in. All right. Sounds good.
Take care.
Thanks.